This next session is the big debate. Each year at the Beet Retreat, we try to identify the single biggest and most important debate that the industry is grappling with. We get to do it twice a year. This time round, you'll be completely unsurprised to know that we're going to be talking about the transition to a multi-currency market. How do we deal with this so-called measurement chaos, or this avalanche of opportunity and innovation that lies in front of us? Do we need a truth set? Do we need a more organized industry that deals better with these problems? And I can't think of anyone better to set the scene for this debate than Lisa. Welcome.
Thank you very much, John.
So Lisa, let's dive straight in. What is the difference between measurement and currency?
Okay, well, in terms of how I delineate the difference between measurement and currency, because they are different things, I really kind of think of currency in terms of transactions. So data achieves currency when both the buyer and the seller agree to evaluate their transaction with that information. And generally, when we're talking about currency, I think of it in two buckets. I think of it in terms of the valuation itself, so things like GRPs, TRPs, CPMs, of course, how we're attributing a monetary value against it, but also the volume metrics, the reach, the audience impressions, those types of measures, because it gives you the breadth of what you're purchasing and what you're talking about, as well as the monetization of it. So I really kind of group it that way. Measurement overall adds value to that, and I think the metrics that we use, or the KPIs that we use to define currency, really are part of a bigger set. And those additional measures that I would use in thinking about data and measurement and currency as they work together too, really serve to refine that value and add additional dimensionality to what we know about that audience and the value it ultimately brings to the advertiser, the agency, and the content provider as well.
So you heard Radha say very clearly, we are heading into a multi-currency market. Is that 100% your view? No question about it. That's where we're going.
Okay. I would be in agreement with that completely, because I think Radha is very savvy to begin with, but on top of that too, I think the time is ripe for us to have new approaches and think about things differently. So thinking about the legacy measurement tactics that have supported our business for so very many years, and they've done a great job along the way, but the infrastructure is really changing now. So kind of going back to an example that we talk about sometimes within my business too, is that think about the roads, the tunnels, the bridges, all the money that we're putting against the rebuilding the infrastructure in the US, because it can't support the capacity, the demand on the system that it was originally designed for. Conversely, our measurement needs to expand. There's so much more information we're capable of capturing. The viewing landscape has grown exponentially. We're seeing new platforms, new ways of viewing emerging. So there's so much more demand. The original infrastructure that we had for measurement and for currency as well really can't support that in the same way. So it's the dawn of new approaches. It's an opportunity to solve problems in new ways.
So you've got a research background, I think. Tell us a bit about your role at VideoAmp, actually, before we go on. What do you look after?
Sure. I'm part of the marketing team at VideoAmp, and I work with insights and analytics. So I have the fortunate position to take a look at the data and put a lot of thought around it and develop the data narratives behind it to help our clients and help the marketplace understand more depth and richness and granularity about the consumer viewing experience. And I also try to inspire our clients with ways that they can apply the data.
And you've got a research background, don't you? How does that shape your thinking about measurement, transparency, currency?
I have to laugh when you say that, because my background in research tends to be a very tactical-oriented one. So I've worked for many years at a number of different networks, as well as on some of the supplier side as well. But a lot of my strength tends to be in the implementation, the calibration of the measurement capabilities. So I spent many years at AMC television networks, working with the digital measurement implementation, so working shoulder to shoulder with the engineers, the operations, and the developers to help them to calibrate those tools so that we could get the view of the data and the insights that we needed out of it. So I think in very, very specific terms when it comes to measurement.
So when we think about this multi-currency market, what specific attributes should we be looking for that a currency should have to make it a good currency?
Okay, that's a great question. There are three criteria that I think of first and foremost. First off, methodology. Currency has to be rooted in a very strong methodology. It has to adhere to accepted conventions and best practices, so that's part of it. The second part of it is transparency, and this is really a big area. It's the disclosure of that information, the business rules, the methods behind it. So it goes hand in hand with the methodology, but it's so important. I think of transparency in terms of, if you think about what you eat, what you're served on your plate, would you eat something where you didn't know what was going into it? So I think of measurement in the same terms, in terms of, well, what is the nutritional value, what's going into it? And that's why I think transparency is so important. But the third criteria I would attribute to a good currency would also be alignment, because it has to align, it has to work, it has to have flexibility and reflect the needs of the marketplace, and that can change. So that is an organic aspect to it. So
just to deep dive into the transparency question a bit, because this is a really interesting one. What are the mechanisms for realizing transparency? What does that mean day to day that a currency should do or offer? How should buyers and sellers be able to interrogate it? What should it offer them?
Okay, there's a lot to this actually with transparency. So I think with buyers and sellers in particular, they have to understand and be conscious and know what's going into what they are the data that they're using to transact business with one another. They have to be in agreement on that. But the transparency aspect of it, the onus isn't necessarily on the measurement company alone. I almost look at that as the tip of the iceberg above the water, what you can see. Because transparency there are so many aspects of it. It's transparency in the workflow, the framing of the information, the informing of the data as well. Because as we're calibrating and processing against our methods on the supplier side, we also need to be informed about the structure of the measurement in terms of what's the programming structure, what are the measures, the metrics, everything that's going into that to make sure that what we're putting that data into, the way we're organizing it before we start putting it through our processes, is aligned correctly with the client in thinking in terms of the content providers. But ultimately, when it comes out of the supplier and goes into the workflows, it should be going through the workflows like water. It should be in the plumbing currency. And we have to configure our system. So there's transparency in the front end to frame all of that data and put the right information to inform the measurement. There's the processing and the synthesizing that happens within the measurement company. But then there's also the workflow to get it into the systems, get it into the agencies, get it into the content providers, into their workflows, their systems, whether it's wide orbit or any other system that they're using, being able to funnel that information through. So I think to some degree, when I think about transparency too, the disclosure aspect of it tends to be a little bit of a sensitive area for some businesses. And I think as an industry, we're not accelerating at the rate with multi-platform measurement that we'd like to ideally be. And some of that has to do with disclosure. So working for my company, VideoAmp, we are very forward-thinking. We are opening up our methods and putting ourselves out there and thinking of new ways and approaches to solve our problems, but we're also disclosing ourselves. And if more businesses could feel more comfortable for the sake of the greater good to facilitate the speed of business, if you will, in terms of sharing best practices, opening up to some degree, sharing between us so we can break through those silos. I think that's important. So that's a long-winded answer to your question on transparency.
And I would like to say, at SIM at the moment, we're in the middle of putting together a guide to try and provide some of that transparency, and we really welcome VideoAmp's partnership in helping to frame the thinking for that guide. So thank you.
Exciting.
Final question, and a quick answer will be appreciated as we race towards the next session. We're obviously heading into a more competitive market for measurement in some sense, but we still need collaboration and possibly standardization to try and make this market work well. Do you think there are opportunities for the industry to collaborate more than we're currently doing to make this transition successful?
Absolutely, and I think our future depends on it. The way that we conduct business depends on it, the way that we're continuing to build. It goes back to that statement of infrastructure. We all have ownership of that. So I think that when we start to open up and we share best practices, we aren't spending our time, wasting time, reinventing things, working in a vacuum separate from one another. We need to be more comfortable opening up and sharing that information so that we can all benefit and we can speed the progress that we ultimately want to see.
Wonderful. Hear, hear. Thank you so much for that
Thank
perspective,
you.
alternative perspective.
Thank you very much. Thanks.